when you get to the US, you come in from whatever status, right? Nobody gets to become a citizen directly. Okay, at the University of Ibadan, in the math department, there was this white guy who was on the board, and I'm like, who is this white guy in our department? The race is not always to the swift or to the fastest runner, right? And the battle is not always to the strongest person. But time and chance happens to them all, right? So citizenship is in a few years, and you can apply.
Hello everyone, welcome. Today we'll be discussing about the journey from F1 student in the United States to a green card holder. Dr. Ayo will be giving us his experiences which he has had in the United States, going from F1 students to H1B to green card holder. We'll be talking about all of that with Dr. Ayo Mekum Adeniran. So my name is Onike Unzube. I'm the digital content creator for Winie Student World, and we're glad to have you here today to walk us through your process, to walk us through what you went through from being an F1 student to getting your H1B visa to becoming a green card holder.
I'm definitely excited to be here and to share just my story, journey and experience.
Happy to have you here. Please, can you introduce yourself to the audience here? Give us your very, very spectacular background, portfolio, everything you got for us.
I would say that first, I am from Nigeria, so you can just say Ayo, Dr. Ayo, that's fine. I started from my undergrad. I schooled at the University of Ibadan. So I had my bachelor's. I finished that in 2009. And then my master's, I finished that in 2014. Of course, after NYSC, for those who are Nigerians, you know what NYSC is, and all of that. So, by God's grace, during my undergrad, I was among the top 3 in my class, graduating, so I had the first class in mathematics. Prior to that, I had gone to represent my university at the, what's it called? I had gone to represent my university at the first version of the, mathematics competition. So it was called the National NAMCOS, National Mathematics Competition for Undergraduate Students. And that was at the National Mathematical Center in Abuja. So this was 2008. And our team came out second overall in the nation, but also I was among the top 3 gold medalists. So that's sort of a little bit of my background before getting to 2014, okay, which is sort of where my US journey starts. So, maybe slightly before then, right? So technically I had applied to the US to come in maybe 2010, around 2011, 2012, which was when I had written my GRE, the graduate record exam, which you have to take to be able to, get admitted to the US. So I had written my GRE, but, nothing worked out. I didn't have much information. I just applied blindly. I didn't finish off some of the applications. And as you can know, if you try things like that haphazardly, they typically don't work out. Okay, so nothing worked out. But then, eventually 2013, 2012 into 2013, I don't remember the specific time or date, but there was a program, I'll say like a seminar in the math department at the University of Ibadan. In the math department, there was this white guy who was on the board, and I'm like, who is this white guy in our department? Because if you know, that's very unusual, right? So it turns out it was a professor from Texas A&M who was traveling to the north, and I think it was either Sokoto at the time or somewhere, to go see a professor there. And it turns out that he knew somebody at my department in Ibadan who had been in the US for a few months. So he decided to pass through Ibadan for one day. He was going to Sokoto for 2 weeks, but he was going to pass through Ibadan for one day. Turns out that meeting was for my sake, because he came, gave a seminar, and frankly, I might have not even chosen to come to the department that day as a master's student because I was doing several things. But I just stumbled in and, I just saw him on the board. I ended up answering a few questions and then ended up introducing myself to him after. like they say, one thing led to another. A year later, I reached out to him. I'm interested in coming to the US. I'm applying. He said, you know what, go ahead and apply. And then that was how I got my admission to Texas A&M in
Wow.
2014. So I believe so much in being in the right place at the right time and God sort of creating opportunities for people. So that's what I would say. That was kind of what. Yes, sorry, you said what?
I said you believe in luck.
Well, I wouldn't say luck. I believe in being positioned, being rightly positioned part time, because stuff happens like in real life. The truth is, there's a scripture, and I like to use the Bible because I think it gives a good guideline. It says that it's the race is not always to the swift or to the fastest runner, right? And the battle is not always to the strongest person, but time and chance happens to them all, right? So another translation says something like being in the right place at the right time, right? So that's it. And if, again, whatever you believe, but I believe in, if your steps are ordered by God and you're in the right place at the right time, you will meet the right people that you need to meet, right? So that, and I would say that for me, that's sort of how my life has been, and sometimes being directed to be in a place, and that's sort of connecting to several other things. So again, we can talk all day, but I want to move from there. So eventually, I came in for my PhD at Texas A&M in 2014, and then had my PhD till 2020 when I graduated. Well, again, by God's grace and to God's glory, I was the first, I'd say, first Black African graduate of that department. There was probably one person who was probably from South Africa and probably had what do you call it? People from Holland, I think Dutch. Yes, there are the people in South Africa. The white people generally have the Dutch heritage, so the name was like a Dutch name. Okay. Who had finished maybe 20 years, whatever, before me. But in terms of like as a Black African, I think I was the first PhD graduate from Texas A&M, which it's a very big school, by the way, as well. So, anyways, that's sort of my background. And then, of course, from there, I got my first postdoc. And then one thing led to another. And now I'm at my current position as an assistant professor at Colby College, all in the northeastern part of the U.S. So that's sort of the summary. Again, you can ask questions in different directions. But since you said you wanted to hear some things, I just wanted to give you some sort of background.
This was a great, inspiring, and a motivational background. Like, I'm motivated. I want to do a lot with my life right now from what I just said. So the question I have for you today: what were some challenges? Like, did you have challenges transitioning from being an F1 student to getting your H1B visa to becoming a green card holder? Can you share some challenges you faced during this period, during this transition period with us?
Absolutely. So let me start by saying, okay, so how did I get into the whole thing of applying or, transitioning, right? Like you say. To be honest, it was a friend who told me about it. So nowadays, a lot of people know more about it. We have people like, Dr. Adi, a lot of people out there who are talking about the same things, However, when I kind of got to know about it, it was not as popular, right? A lot of people didn't even know about it. But it was a friend who had done it a few years before who told me, and he was also a UI who had graduated from Texas A&M. And then we're friends and close friends today. And then back then he told me, Ayo, you should probably apply to this thing so that when you're looking for a job, you will be able to have a softer landing, right? You don't have to wait because that was the dreaded question, right? For most people. Would you need scholarship, right? That's usually the question. It's like, would you need sponsorship now or in the future? Are you eligible to work in the US, right? These are the questions you see when you're trying to fill out a job application. And many people, there's always that, oh, well, maybe you're qualified, everything else is good, except, when you get to that point, what happens, right? So I would say that for me, particularly, when my friend told me one major limitation or challenge was money, right? I didn't have the money. Two, I didn't have publications at the time. And I'm saying this again, this is dating back to, we're saying 2018, 2019, okay, when, the administration in this country was not, I would say, not the same administration as is there now, right? And so that would mean that their impression about immigration, or the sort of the face that the administration had towards immigration, is different than the current face, if that makes sense. So what that meant was that, like, I needed, of course, money, but secondly as well, I needed publications. Okay, and we had heard of cases where someone will have publications, multiple citations, and still will be denied the green card, the I-140, which is the specific one. So there was that constant hesitation of, okay, when is the best time to proceed? So when I first decided, okay, you know what, I think that by this time I was graduating, or I just graduated, and I said, okay, let me apply. So I reached out to two different lawyers. The two different major lawyers that people use. One is based in Dallas. The other one I don't remember, but they were like the top two names I'd had from people. And then I reached out to them because, you have to sort of get a consultation, send them your CV, tell them your Google Scholar, everything, to kind of say, okay, this is where I'm at. What do you think? And then the lawyers will sort of get back to you. And the first one was like, we're not taking your case. The second one was like, no, we're not taking your case. So it's like, okay, what do you do, right? First, I didn't have the money. Then secondly, my friend was willing to actually give me some of the money. That's how, a good friend, right? So I was like, okay, you know what, let's do this. And then that wasn't forthcoming. So, but thankfully I'd gotten my job, my postdoc. And so I was able to go start that with the hope that, because they had told me clearly they were not going to file for me. So I needed to come up with a way after my 1 year OPT. For those who might not know, OPT is optional practical training. So it's every student in the US who has a degree, who does a degree, whether college or master's or PhD, you have access to a 1 year optional practical training after your studies. So everybody should be aware of that, and you should absolutely apply early to get that. And so during that period, it's technically when people try to say, okay, do I want to apply to a job that will file a H1B for me? Or do I want to actually go ahead and apply for myself, right? So my aim was, you know what, I'm going to file for myself at some point here. And then, well, unfortunately, like I said, the first company turned me down, the second one turned me down. And then one day, after a while, I decided, you know what, let me look online. I just, again, remember the theme of what I said earlier. Being in the right place at the right time, being sort of led. And then I just searched, and I just found this company online on Google that happened to be in Illinois.
Illinois.
And I was like, oh.
Where is Illinois?
Sorry,
Illinois.
say that again.
Where is Illinois?
The state, in the state of Illinois in the US.
Okay.
Yes. So they were based in the state of Illinois in the US. So I don't know whether it's in Chicago, but I'm not sure. But yeah, in the state of Illinois. So that was this. So what happened was that I then reached out to this person, and then they gave me an opportunity to talk with the main lawyer for 30 minutes, which is usually a first free consultation, right? And then, and that was the thing I appreciated. The lawyer said, you know what, you're not ready right now, because you have, as at the time, I had maybe 2 publications, and my citations were maybe under 10, maybe 8 or 9. And so these are some of the things that are important, where if you are trying to transition to the green card using the route I took, which is essentially the I-140, self-petitioning or filing for the NIW, National Interest Waiver. So that's sort of the route I took. Okay, so that's, again, which is technically based on a number of things. I think it's about 3 legs, if I remember. The first one is, of course, you should have an advanced degree. Second one is whatever you are doing should be in the interest of the US. should contribute to one of like 4 or 5 sectors. And then I don't remember the exact one, the third one, but it's typically things like you have to have had some publications, you should have some citations for publications, right? And so based on how many those are, would technically be things that the officer who is in charge will be looking at to determine whether or not to grant, that application. So yeah, that's again, I haven't talked much about the story after, but those were the challenges I faced to be able to come to even apply, So I don't know if that helps answer your question.
It does. Do you have like a particular resource or like a support system that you found really helpful during this journey, during this transitioning? Were there resources or support systems that you can share with us that was probably of great help or even little help during this
transition? That's a great question. So during this time, I would say back then, there were not as many resources as there are today. So you see earlier, I mentioned Dr. Adiola Oluwabamiji, who, some of you might know. She's very out there. She like, this is what she does. She helps people. There are other people out there. There's, I forget, there's one doctor in Dallas who is an associate or assistant professor in Dallas. There's one other lady, I forget her name. Again, there's a number of people, and I'm not trying to give them like free advice, but I'm just saying, if you wanted to like look online and just say, where can I get support, right? Or where can I get resources?
Dr. Winie is there as well.
Yes, exactly. So Winie, yes, for this particular channel. So yes, I should absolutely say that. So, but my point is that back then, there were not all of these people were not there, right? I mean, like, it was more like, if you knew, you knew. If you didn't know, you didn't know, right? So, but like I told you earlier, I had a friend who had done it. So he was sort of my go-to person to get back with. I had a few, 1 or 2 guys who were also from the same school, and then we'll meet from time to time and be like, oh, have you, how was this? Oh, did you apply? Oh, I got rejected. Oh, what happened? What did they say? Have you reapplied again? And then those who got it was like, oh, well, how did you get it? How many citations did you have? So that was it was more of a, person to person thing where, okay, this person did this, or, I know that this person did this because this person told me about it. And that was it. But other than that, there were no like plain resources out there at the time. But today, there's a lot.
Yeah, so basically, mostly open communication was what helped you through.
Absolutely.
The transition. Okay, that's great. What experiences from your F1 student life do you think helped you obtain your green card? What experiences did you think buffered your process to getting a green card, obtaining a green card?
Well, okay. So I'll say that experiences will be more of things I did or things that I, like. So one major thing, like you said, is particularly because of the nature of how the US is, right? The US, the UK, Canada, I mean, many of these countries, as you might know, they're very individualistic. Okay, people are largely by themselves. So you have to be very intentional, right? To talk to people, to interact with people, to ask questions. You can't be like, oh, well, I'm a quiet person, so I don't talk to anybody. If you do that, then you wouldn't get the information you need. I don't know if that makes sense. So that was something that and then I also was part of a community. So I have shared this somewhere before that we used to do on Friday nights, a number of African students, mostly, I mean, there were some other people, but mostly African students who meet at my place. So myself and my wife would host a lot of African students for a Bible study, and then like interactive sessions. We'll talk, we'll chat, we'll celebrate birthdays, we'll do things. So that was sort of something that kept us through that season, but also served as a touch point for a lot of this information, right? So if somebody got information, they will share with the group or say, oh, by the way, if you're interviewing, this and this is what you should know, or this is what you should do. So again, that's something I can never overemphasize. Community. You have to find community wherever you are. In Nigeria or back in our, West African roots, it's very easy to just assume that community will happen, right? Because somebody will look for you, or you have a schoolmate, or you can go to, that doesn't happen here, okay? Like, if you are not intentional about reaching out to people or being in touch with people, you're not going to get the information you need. And there was somebody I know, who really, like, most of the people, at least from my school, sort of had somebody or the other they were connected with. So I think it helped. But I would say that there was at least one person I know who, because of lack of information and not being connected to a group like I'm describing, had to go back to Nigeria against his will because he was thinking that somebody was going to file for him, and it turns out the people that were going to file for him were his siblings who legitimately were citizens but really could not file for him, or even if they did, it would take about 10 years or whatever. So by the time he found out he could do other things, it was late and he had to kind of go back. Even though, and I'm not saying there's any problem with going back. I'm just saying it's different if you wanted to go back by your will versus you wanted to go back, or you didn't want to go back and then you had to go back, right? That kind of thing. So yeah, those are the things I would say that help. Definitely community communication, yes.
I'm curious. So, like, how did obtaining a green card, how do you think or how do you feel it impacted on your personal life and your career life? Vice versa. How do you think obtaining a green card has impacted on good lives?
Okay, so I'll say that, I mean, I won't say so much in some sense. In some sense, yes, it has impacted for sure. But what it does, and I will say this: what it does is that, number one, it puts your mind at rest to a large extent, right? That, okay, you know what? I am not on a time clock, right? Nobody's watching the time for me. You have to do this, and you have to be out of this country by so day, right? Or I am stuck in this company, I'm stuck in this place. If I don't do it and they get me out, then I have blah, blah, blah number of days before I have to leave the country, right? So that's something that's definitely helped, is that I know that having gotten my green card, I can confidently apply to anything else, apply for anything else. I mean, as long as it doesn't require me to be a citizen or to vote and whatever, right? Like, I can apply to things and be considered, okay, without having to think of the immigration aspect. Because, right, like in the US, and again with several other countries, it's one thing to have the degree, right? Okay, you schooled here, awesome, wonderful. But the second thing is, do you have the immigration status that is needed to get a job, right? So those two things are equally important. On one hand is the degree, likely from a US university, okay? And on the other hand is, do you have the immigration, status that is needed for the position? And both are very important, right? Because many times you realize you have one and that helps you, but the other one, you are lacking it, and that kind of keeps affecting you. Now, it doesn't mean it's a walk in the park. Even when you have your green card, you're going to apply to things and be turned down as well, right? Like right now, the job market is crazy almost everywhere. So that's not a guarantee, but at least it takes that away from your worry, right? So it makes you to be able to apply to things, confidently without feeling like, oh, do I qualify? Can I, and then secondly, you're on a path to citizenship, right? So citizenship is in a few years and you can apply, all things being equal, right? So that's one other good thing, is that that, okay, it's a matter of time. So like that, my friend I told you about, who had gotten his before me, just got his US citizenship this year, right? And he already has his passport and stuff like that. So it's only a matter of time. Again, it's just the process. So that I think that does help, when you know that you have this. It's sort of, then also maybe it's one last thing I would say is, it helps you to start to think about, what do I really want to do, right? Beyond where you are at right now, beyond your current job, your current position, then you can start to ask questions of, is this what I want to do long term? Do I want to change a career? Do I want to change my field? Do I want to go somewhere else, right? Those are sort of the questions you can start to ask yourself.
Looking back at your experience and everything you've been through, is there anything that you have done differently if you had the time to go back to your F1 visa days, H1B visa days before then? Is there anything that you would have done differently that you'd like to share? mistakes that you've made probably that we can help other people and, stop them from making those kinds of mistakes?
So yeah, like I said, because again, stuff is also dependent on. It's not just okay. Well, am I qualified? Right. There was also the factor of what government was in power at the time. So I mean, just to be plain, when I was applying, as at the time I was considering applying, we were under the Republican administration, right, which is President Trump. And now, we're under a Democrat administration, which is President Biden. And I mean, people know this, that generally, Democrats are generally more favored towards immigration, right? Than Republicans. So that generally kind of determines sort of what is the atmosphere. Okay, so even before President Trump was President Obama, who was president. And so those people, for example, who got their green cards then, for example, would apply and within like a month, it will be approved. I mean, not the green card itself, the main one, the I-140, which is the petition for the national interest waiver, right? So they would get it approved within like a month, within 30 days, within 2 months. But when I did mine, it took a full year, right? A full one whole year, right? Again, like I said, because of COVID also definitely played a role. But also, like I said, the administration in power was also not as friendly towards immigration in terms of their policies. So it's very important to know that. However, now, I have actually spoken to somebody recently. I was like, have you applied for your green card? Like, you should self-petition. If you have any publications, you should go ahead. I've also spoken to people of recent who said, oh, you know what, I did it and I got it in a week. And I was like, what? Because, like I said, it's different now because the current administration is highly favorable towards advanced degrees, right? They want people to come in. So I know people from even outside the US who have gotten their I-140 approved. The only problem is now there's a backlog on the actual green cards, but they have approved the waiver. It's just the change of status to green card, right? So that's something I was going to say. Again, that is sort of out of your, it's out of your control. You can't determine what administration. But if you are in an administration, like those who are, for example, currently students who currently have that opportunity, you should probably apply, right? You should probably take the opportunity to apply, and I'm guessing Dr. Winie can also give you some tips about applying, making the best of the opportunity you have right now, So for me, back then, I would say I was dragging my feet a little bit, right? Just because of the different things that was going on. So maybe if I had the opportunity to go again, I'll probably do it faster and maybe, but to be honest, I don't regret the time. I think that I did it at the right time. Again, because if I tried it before, it might have been rejected, just to be honest. I might not have gotten my green card approved. Again, because I didn't have as much citations. And back then, it was a big deal. Because even when the lawyer took my case, they were like, this is a risk. Okay, he was like, we're going to do this, but it's a risk because you barely have about 10, 11 citations, just 2 or 3 publications. It's not enough, right? It has not gained enough ground, but we're going to attempt to try. And then, of course, I believe there was the favor of God there, and I had it. But like I said, it took a while. Whereas I'm hearing of people today who have a master's, who don't even have like maybe major publications. Maybe they have 1, right? And not much citations, and they get it approved. So again, I think that beyond just you have to also kind of time your application to be at a time when things are more favorable. So I think that's one thing to say. And one thing I would probably do earlier, like you're asking, is to be intentional about publications, be intentional about, publishing early, working, on research, starting early, trying to get things out the door early. Because with research, there's a tendency to sort of lay back or sometimes allow it to go at a pace. And to be honest, you determine how quick your research moves. So if there's an opportunity to publish, to push your work a little faster, then I think that's something to do because that will help give you some more leverage.
like a difference between green card holders and citizens?
Absolutely, yes.
Is how big of a difference is it? Like what's the difference really in terms of living and working and everything?
Oh, okay. So when you get, how do I describe this? So when you get to the US, you come in from whatever status, right? So nobody gets to become a citizen directly. Okay, you get your first sort of permanent status that you get in the US is permanent residency. I think in the UK it's called like the indefinite leave to remain or something like the ILR. In the US it's called PR. In Canada it's also called PR. It's sort of an opportunity during that time when you sort of have made your intention that this is going to be your home, if that makes sense. So, for example, when I traveled to Nigeria last year, if you check on my Instagram, you see some videos. I traveled to Nigeria last year. Then when I came back, I went through immigration and I was on a different line than I would have been before, for example, right? So there's the line for if you're visiting, you're a student, you're on any other visa. And then there's the line for you are either a US citizen, a Canadian citizen, or a US permanent resident. That line is different. And so if you were on the other line, and maybe this is more of a funny story, an anecdote, because until you experience it, you might not know the difference. But when you're on the other line, there's a likelihood they will question you more harshly. They will pull you to the side. They would ask, are you bringing any food? What's happening? Okay, are you sure? Sometimes they even take you to a secondary room, right? For people who have had those experiences. But once you're on this other line, the green card or the citizens and green card line, it's much faster. In fact, all the lady asked me at the immigration desk was, oh, so I see you traveled to Nigeria. Why and how long? I said, oh, I went to see family and a couple of days, just 2 weeks. And she said, oh, okay. Do you have any food? Not really. Okay, welcome back home. And that's all she said. So notice the terminology, welcome back home. Because the impression is you have made your intention to make here your permanent home. So that's why it's called permanent residence. Whereas the citizenship means you have now naturalized, or you are either born a citizen, which, if you're born here, like my daughter was born here, so she's born a citizen, right? Or you naturalize. So naturalizing through either marriage or through your job, like the H1B to, the green card, or like in my case, through self-petitioning, which is like, you petition to be for that requirement to be waived, so that I don't have to wait for someone else to file for me. I can self-petition. I can file for myself. So that's the thing. So so the difference pretty much is, like I said, the one I've experienced. You have a different line, but that's not the difference because it's the same line for both of you. But in terms of actual difference, for a permanent residence, in the worst case scenario, you can still be hindered from coming into the US, right? Like during COVID, there were people who were not allowed to come into the US, even though they were permanent residents, again, because of some things that had happened. But if you're a citizen, you cannot be denied. Like, you're essentially a citizen. You cannot be denied, right? You belong to that country. So that's some differences. The other one I would say is that you cannot vote. So as a permanent resident, you cannot vote and you cannot be voted for. So you cannot participate in politics in that sense. The other thing is that there are jobs that you cannot do. Okay, the government will say specifically there are jobs for citizens and citizens only and nationals only. That's it. So but most other things that citizens have as a permanent resident, you also have. So which is kind of like a step just before getting your citizenship. So that's the So it's definitely a different thing, but it's closer to being a citizen than being in any other status, if that makes sense.
How long did it take you to move from F1 visa to green card holder from your admission year?
Oh, okay. I got to the US 2014, and then I got my green card in just last year, actually. So 9 years.
9 years, okay.
Yes.
Still kind of.
But of course, again, there are different things that happen in between, right? So I graduated 2020. I got so that means I got my OPT in 2020. into 2021. So remember, it's for 1 year. Yes, Stephanie, you're right. It's like 9 years. That's exactly right. So I got in 20. I got my OPT 2020 to 2021. So that's for 1 year. And typically, you do get what is called an OPT STEM extension. So if you did any course, if your advanced course was like STEM related, that is science, technology, engineering, mathematics, which mine is mathematics, right? If you're along any of those lines, then technically you could qualify for what is called the OPT STEM extension. So in other words, after that 1 year, you can get 2 more years. Okay. However, those 2 more years can only be used at some specific types of employers. So those employers have to be what are called e-verified employers. So the employer I was with at the time in California was not e-verified. It's not anything big. It just means a verification that says you can employ people like this. But if as an employer you never employ those people, you only employ citizens, then you never have to get it, right? So they had never had to do it as far as I'm aware. So they didn't have that opportunity. So that's why I couldn't stay in California on my first postdoc beyond 1 year, right? I had to leave because I couldn't extend, if that makes sense. So technically I could go somewhere else and try to get that extension and work for 2 years. But again, I'll be back to the same question, right? How do I proceed from here? So, but thankfully, by the time I was applying, so I kind of went back on the job market to apply, and then I got my H1B. So I got a job, of course, and then the job was going to file for me for the H1B. So when I knew that was around April 2021, then by May, the lawyer then said, okay, now that we have some sort of status, you can then let's submit your NIW, that is your green card petition. And so then we did that. So because you have to have an underlying status while your green card thing is processing. Because if you don't have and the green card is denied, then you have to leave the country, right? So you have to have an underlying thing. So my job filed for me for my H1B, and then we submitted the green card petition. And then when that got approved a year after, so that was 2022, and then started the process for the change of status or the adjustment of status to the green card from the H1B, and that took from 2022 to 2023, so another 1 year, and that's how I got that last year. So to answer, I think someone else asked the question of, is that typical? I think it depends, to be honest. I'll come to the other question. So I would say that it depends on specifically what kind of course you're doing, right? So for example, if what I did was a master's, maybe it might not have taken as long because my PhD took 6 years. So most PhDs in the US take about 5 years to 6 years. Some people even do up to 7 years. So mine took 6 years. Okay. So because sort of it's like a master's is sort of incorporated in there because you have to sort of take classes, right, in the US just in general. So that's sort of the idea. But if, for example, I did a master's within 2 years and maybe I immediately got a job and maybe I did H1B for maybe 3 years, then maybe the job filed for me after 3 years, right? Typically, that's how most people get it. And then maybe within 1 or 2 years. So maybe within 6, 7 years, it's possible to get it rather than, taking up to 9 years. So, and some people it takes longer. I mean, some people it takes even longer. But again, I think it just depends on how you came in, when you apply, what routes through which you applied, right? But yeah, most employers will not file for you for a green card right away because, I mean, you are just a new employee. So, but you can sometimes negotiate it in your job or in your starting package that, I would like to have a green card so that my mind would be at rest. Would you be willing to file for me? And some employers will say, sure, why not? So that's so it could, yes. And I think someone is asking about about marrying a white person. Does it fall under citizenship of permanent resident? Okay, so when you marry somebody, it doesn't matter whether it's a white, black, Asian, Hispanic, it doesn't matter. If the person is a US citizen, they can file for you, okay, as their spouse. And that kind of typically moves fast, okay, because they are a citizen. So their application is given priority. So if they file for you, then usually within, I think 6 months is what it is. Within 6 months, you should be able to get your green card. So like I said, you don't get into citizenship directly. Nobody gets to citizenship directly, no matter who you are. You get into permanent residency first. However, if you get into permanent residency through marriage and not through a job or something else, you can get to your citizenship, I think, faster. So I think for those who get to permanent residency through marriage, they can get into citizenship, I think, within 3 years rather than 5 or 6 years and something like that. So
I just have a request. We want to ask if you have any advice, tips, or advice you wish to share with F1 students or people who are considering to, pursue their studies abroad.
Sure. I can see a question, K-Gab. Can I apply when I'm about to renew my F1 visa? Yeah. So when you say apply, what do you mean apply? So K-Gab 1, if you don't mind explaining, giving more context. Is it applying for H1B, applying for OPT, or applying for green card? Which one? Because they have talked about 3 different things. So maybe when you clarify. Okay. In the meantime, you said, do I have any advice for people? If you're an H1B, if you're an F1 student or even J1 student, because that's a whole different category, I would say do not keep to yourself. Interact with people. And I think that goes for pretty much any status you are in the US. One, because it's good, right? Don't be an island. It can be isolating being in this country. Okay, it's not like being in Nigeria, in Ghana, and wherever. It can be hard to be on your own in those in this place, simply because, like I said, it can be highly individualistic. So that's sort of the point I'm making here. So, okay, K-Gab, thank you. I think I'll try to answer your question. So, yeah, so my advice would be, don't be outside of community. Interact with people, network with people, talk to people, okay? That's one of the biggest things I've learned. Talk to people. You can't say, oh, I'm so shy, I'm so introverted that I will not talk to anybody. But you know that you need a job, right? So if you need a job, you have to speak up, So the same way with grad school, the same way with F1, everything here in the US, there's a huge percentage of taking responsibility and owning your process by yourself. And nobody will do that for you. So that's very important that people know that, that you pay attention to this sort of thing. You are very intentional, right? Very intentional about sort of what you do, So what else? I would say that you should absolutely, from the very beginning, give your very best. Once you come in as a student, from your very first semester, make sure you are doing well. Okay, in Nigeria, some people say things like school is scam, school na scam, or things like that. Or, oh, it doesn't matter what degree you have. It does matter, okay? Your GP matters. It's not everything, but it does matter. So you should, from the get-go, please get into it, jump into it, try to, exactly, like they say in the US, you put your best foot forward. Someone say making new friends, connecting with people, yes. All of that, okay? Yes. And so I think Stephanie was saying something about alumni. Absolutely. I mean, your alumni is one of your greatest network. You want to leverage your alumni community. Reach out to people, both from Nigeria, your alumni from Nigeria. That's actually true. There was the fellowship I belonged to when I was on campus at the University of Ibadan. We have an strong alumni community here in the US, actually in North America. And so we have like monthly interactions. And then, and then there's like a WhatsApp group and things like that. I know sometimes some things can look like tedious and boring or burdensome, but I would say that those things can be very helpful. Especially because you never know when, like you say, you will need to leverage your network. And you don't want it to be that point where you're now running around and trying to say, okay, oh, can I get LinkedIn? Can I, you want to be able to have a network you can build on. And not just because you want to take advantage of people, if that makes sense, or because somebody will help you, but just for the sake of being a good and regular normal human being, right? Relate with people, build your network, because again, you never know. So that's something I keep saying to people, you never know. So build your network, interact with people, because you never know at what point you will need that network. So that's very important. So K-Gap, sorry, I promised to come back to your question. You asked something about applying for the NIWEB2 application. So I would say go ahead and renew your F1. If you're a student, you want to renew your F1 first, and then apply for your NIW, because the NIWEB2 does not indicate interests. Okay, that's important to note. It has not indicated any change in your. So, for example, you can apply for NIWEB2 from Australia, and I mean, you're not even in the US. So it just indicates that you want a national interest waiver. However, it is when that is approved and you want to adjust your status, that's when you indicate, interest, right? That you want to change status or something. Okay, so I would say go ahead with your F1 first, so that you have a status that is valid. And then you can now submit. If you feel like you qualify, or you talk to a lawyer and they tell you this is great, then go ahead and apply for the EB2. So that if that, for example, God forbid, doesn't work out, your F1 is still valid, right? You keep going on. So I hope that makes sense. Asking a question again. You mentioned not having any research background. How were you able to navigate that to get admission in the STEM course? So maybe let me clarify. So I did my master's at the University of Ibadan. So I'd done a master's before coming in. A lot of PhDs in the US do not necessarily require a master's, okay, on paper, and that's true. But what that technically means in practice is that a number of US students, or students who schooled in the US and maybe Canada, right, not America, can get in, having sort of gone through, how do I say it? They've gone through things like research experiences for undergraduates. They've done one or two things during their undergraduate experiences. Many of us in Nigeria don't have those opportunities. Okay, so. But for most of us, at least speaking from my experience from my school and my department at Texas A&M, I did not see them admit anybody internationally, that is an international student, who hadn't done a master's in their country or done something somewhere. So I would say that I try to tell people, if you're trying to get into the US, one of the first, do a master's, so that you leverage what your background is. Now, don't get me wrong, there are those who are going to get admitted without masters. I've seen a few here and there. But because the competition is stiff and you're applying together with people from all over the world to come into the US, you want to make sure that your application is also standing out. And if you have any opportunities to do internships, to do research experiences, to work in a lab or something, to join organizations that do things, just do those things, okay? That's something I would strongly encourage people back in Nigeria, if you're trying to apply to come to the US, because you don't want it to be like, oh, well, I just did my first degree, I have a 2-1, and that's it. Trust me, they've seen people with way better results than yours, and they're not even admitting them. And another thing is, do your own research. Like, find out about schools that you're applying to. Find out about, there are big schools, there are small schools, there are medium schools, there are liberal arts colleges, there are all kinds of schools in the US. So you want to know, what kind of school am I targeting? What kind of school am I going to? So those are some of the things you want to check out as you start that journey. Again, I can't cover everything in one sitting, but I hope this is helpful. And like I said, Dr. Winie should be able to help you answer some of these questions as well. And like I said, there are all sorts of resources on YouTube now. When I came to this country, I'm not even sure I knew YouTube. Like there's YouTube, there's Instagram, there's LinkedIn, there's X or Twitter, right? There's a lot of resources out there. People are sharing scholarship resources every week. Like, I see those things. Back then, I didn't even know. Like, it was more like, this is your personal thing that I was pursuing. But now it's like, oh, everybody knows about these things, right? So more of you guys have a better advantage in terms of, compared to what those of us who got in 10 years ago had, right? And things have also changed between then and now. So, okay, let me stop there, and so that we can start to wrap up. Yes.
That's basically it. Just like Stephanie said, thank God we met Prof. EY, the talking has started. Definitely.
Okay.
Definitely. That's just about it. Thank you for the advice. Thank you for the sharing your experiences. It was most definitely of help. I will most definitely be of help for a lot of people who are already there, people who are aspiring to, pursue their study abroad dream, people who are already there on F1 visas, those who are already there on H1B, and looking to transition. Hearing your transition story, hearing the background and everything, I'm sure they must have picked a thing or two from the journey, which would help them in the future. And I'm very thankful for that. Very thankful to you for sharing your experiences.
Sure.
Thank you very much for joining us
Sure.
today. We are very happy to have you. And we'll be very happy to have you again in the future for more discussions, if it's okay with you.
Sure. We'll see how it goes. But yeah, no, I've definitely enjoyed my time being here. And hopefully I've been able to help answer some questions and, help people. So,
Definitely, a lot of questions have been answered already.
okay. In life, nobody's an island, right? We must all, interact with one another, learn, and be of benefit to one another. And we build. And like someone said, experience is the best teacher for somebody who doesn't learn from other people's experiences. So
Yeah,
you should learn from other people's experiences. Otherwise, you will have to go through yours. And sometimes yours might not be pleasant, right? And it doesn't make
yeah,
sense to make the same mistakes again if you can avoid them, right? So I would say, as much as possible, learn from other people, interact with other people, find out what other people knew or what other people did to get to where they are, right? And that will help you, cut short your own journey, right? And cut short your own, like, it would help you to avoid pitfalls. It will help you to be able to navigate properly without having to go through some of those other things that they went through, right? So that's what I would suggest. And I wish every one of you the very best for those who are applying and those who are just joining, who are not planning to come to the US or who are in the US already and are good to go. Thank you for joining as well. And I wish you guys all the best. Thank you for having me. And yeah, sure. Looking forward to maybe another time when we will have this again.
okay.
All right.
Goodbye, everyone. Bye, Dr. AY.
All right. Bye.